You want to solve police brutality? Solve the Supreme Court. We vote for our Congress, we vote for the President of the United States, and we have an unelected body of Supreme Court people who decide the laws in our country. These green lines here is where Congress gives us laws that gives us rights. These cases here, the Supreme Court took our rights away. The results, thousands of lynchings for decades, almost 100 years. We repeat what happened in 1865 to 1870. We get our rights, the Supreme Court takes them away with Terry versus Ohio. This roster of courts, they wanted to make sure your rights couldn't be applied to you. This roster of court, they want to make sure they're the arbitrators of police officer safety. That's the problem in America. It's the Supreme Court. If we don't make the Supreme Court electable, then we're doomed. If we don't make the Supreme Court electable, then we're doomed. My name is ChilleDeCastro. Thank you for your time. The reason that all these people are legally departed is because of the Supreme Court. Because they're not elected. Clarence Thomas didn't talk for his first 10 years on the Supreme Court. How come? Because if you don't talk for 10 years and then you speak up, well, I haven't talked in 10 years. It's a power move because he knows that he's going to be there for life. Your children, millennials, Gen Z, you'll have no representation at the highest level your entire life. These people, they'll die in their positions. So how do we make them electable? We use the 9th Amendment, our unenumerated rights that belong to us. We didn't elect senators until 1913 because it was tyranny. Now we're going to use the 9th Amendment because we want to elect the Supreme Court justices. People who say that they're the arbitrators of our civil rights, we need to elect those people. They need to run on a platform, and then we need to elect them every 4 years, and every 2 years, they're up for impeachment. We need to elect the Supreme Court using the 9th Amendment. What is the functionality of our Supreme Court? We elect Congress, and they write laws. We elect the president, and then he signs the laws that Congress writes. The Supreme Court is the arbitrator of our civil rights. Any laws that Congress writes or the president signs, the Supreme Court then decides whether or not they're constitutional. Meaning, if any of those laws go against your civil liberties, then the Supreme Court can strike them down. But what has the Supreme Court done instead of that? They've worked against us since the beginning. Dred Scott, 1857, they say Dred Scott's not a man, he's not a human being because he's of racism. It's not the Constitution that's racist, it's the men. We have a 9th Amendment right that says we have rights that are not enumerated. We passed the 17th Amendment in 1913 to elect senators to Congress. It's time to use the 9th Amendment to elect the Supreme Court. The guardians of our civil rights, we should have a say in who they are. I'm not sure. I think that would be a great question for Noah Feldman, who I just posted a few minutes ago. I do know this, that the 17th Amendment that elects the senators in America, it happened in 1913. We didn't elect senators from 1607 to 1913, 1776 to 1913, meaning that the structure of the Constitution wasn't set up with the understanding that men are corrupted. And that if you give someone absolute power, it corrupts them to the core. So we didn't elect senators until 1913. And why did we start to do that? Because the people revolted. The senators had created such tyranny and things were going so poorly that they demanded that we elect senators. And if you remember, 7 years later, women got the right to vote. So I'm not sure of the answer of why we don't elect the Supreme Court, but guess what? We live in a democratic republic. It's up to us. You really have to understand the difference between civil liberties and civil rights. There's a very big difference between the two. Civil liberties are what are given to us from God. The Constitution is based on civil liberties. They are supreme, guaranteed by the federal government, but nothing goes before them and nothing can go above them. That's called a civil liberty. Civil rights are what the government gives us to ensure our civil liberties for minority classes. So in other words, there's not enough people to have democratic republic representation, and so the government says your civil liberties aren't being respected. The job of the Supreme Court is to ensure your civil liberties, and that's why Congress passes civil rights acts. But then the Supreme Court takes those away, and specifically against people of color. This is the fact of our history. You have to know the difference between civil liberties and civil rights. So what happens when your civil liberties are stripped away? In 1876, when Cruikshank from the Supreme Court stripped away the 14th Amendment, Thousands of lynchings for decades happened because you didn't have equal protection under the law. When Terry v. Ohio passed in 1968, you were supposed to be free in your person, papers, houses, and effects. That stripped away your Fourth Amendment. Over 7.5 million people have gone to prison since Terry passed. In 1919, in a case called Sinek versus United States, Charles Sinek and his wife Elizabeth, pamphlets, don't go to war, assert your rights. They were arrested and charged with treason. Their case went to the Supreme Court upheld it. And then they colluded with the media and the president to put out Oliver Wendell Holmes' message, you can't scream fire in a movie theater. Your First Amendment right is limited. It was a snow job. They sold you a bag of goods. Have you repeated that? You have, haven't you? Your First Amendment right is not limited. Don't ever, ever diminish our liberties. So you hear me rap? We need to make the Supreme Court electable and break it up into 6 different districts. Currently, we have 9 appointed Supreme Court justices who aren't working for our civil liberties, they're working against us. They're constantly making rulings that infringe on our civil liberties. Sitz versus Michigan State Police, passed in 1990, says that we can go through a DUI checkpoint and it's a small intrusion into our civil liberties. That case was overruled by the appeals court that said it's a huge invasion into your civil liberties. But power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So those Supreme Court justices had to overrule the appeals court. We split up the 9 tyrants into 6 different Supreme Court districts. We elect 9 judges in each district. So at start, each different district elects 7, 7, 7, 8, 8, 8, and we split those 9 tyrants up who are appointed, who are not working for you and me and our civil liberties. How come they only hear 80 cases a year? Because they're about our rights, We got to fight together to make these guys elected, and they should have to run on a platform of liberty. When the Supreme Court makes an unjust and unconstitutional law and a cop is involved, it lasts forever and it then applies to all of us. In Bad Elk versus United States, John Bad Elk rightfully resists a warrantless arrest, and common law states that you can resist an unlawful arrest, and the Supreme Court says we know that, but we're still going to charge him with manslaughter. John Bad Elk dies in jail. It applies to all of us. You can never resist police because of a 1900 case called Bad Elk versus United States. Buck versus Bell. Carrie Bell is sterilized. They say she's feeble-minded. And that's where the famous saying says that better to spare 3 generations than a lifetime of imbeciles and to sterilize her. It lasts today. Johnson versus Glick. The prison guards beat up Australia Johnson, put him in the hospital, and the Supreme Court says that's not a 1983, which is called a civil rights violation. And now, if you're beaten up in prison by the guards, it's almost impossible to get a 1983. Terry v. Ohio. John McFadden's a super cop. He can predict crime, he says. Now all cops can predict crime. They think if you're about to commit a crime, they can detain you. And what he do? He grabbed John Terry. Now all cops can grab you. It applies to all of us. Atwater versus City of Lago Vista. The woman's arrested for not wearing a seatbelt. If that had been televised on TV, and that case had been going on, those judges would have been impeached immediately. You can be arrested now for absolutely anything. When they make unjust, unconstitutional laws, it then applies to all of us.
So that means that the fact that our system is in fact not driven by the structure of the Constitution as written is an open secret. We all know it. And that makes it more justifiable and less elitist.
No, not at all. That's not true. If you're an elitist, then you don't have to be suffering from the lack of constitutional standards. Whereas if you're a commoner, hey, what's going on here?
Detainment.
Oh, I see. So the constitutional standard is the Fourth Amendment that says you have to have probable cause to arrest someone. You've arrested him. Do you have probable cause?
All I need is reasonable suspicion.
Okay, so do you feel like this is a constitutional standard?
No. Shut up!
Oh, so you can be treated any way that they decide. Noah, how many times have you been on your knees, Noah? How many times have you been put in handcuffs? How many times have you been arrested and they don't tell you what's going on? And this is okay with you? This is good? You like this? It's up to young people to change this world. I will be dead by the time you change the world. In a case called Pace versus Alabama in 1883, this criminalized interracial relationships. In 1884, 160 white people were lynched, the most on record by the NAACP. Pace versus Alabama that happened in 1883 was not overturned. Until 1967 in a case called Loving versus Virginia. You got the ball, Gen Z. You got the ball. You got to make these guys electable. Plessy versus Ferguson passed in 1896, took 58 years to overturn. You will live your lifetime before you see change because Plessy was not overruled. Until Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. Gen Z, you got the ball. Are you listening to me? Tyranny is afoot. We didn't elect senators until the 17th Amendment, and now we elect them. We need to make the Supreme Court electable. Gen Z, you got the ball. I'm with Officer Madwin and Garrett, our volunteer. And so what's going on here, Officer Madwin?
I'm reasonably suspicious.
Okay. Is there any probable cause?
Nope.
Has he broken the law?
Nope.
Okay. So what happens because you're reasonably suspicious?
A POW-style arrest that I learned in the Army.
But he hasn't done anything wrong.
Nope.
Okay. So after you're reasonably suspicious, what happens next?
Get on your belly! Get on your fucking belly! Down! 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 And then I put my boot on the back of his neck because I am here for my life.
So we have no civil liberties if you're suspicious of us.
Correct.
Did you hear that? Has he done anything wrong yet? No. Has there been any law broken? No. This is Terry. This is what a Terry stop is. Do you like this? You think this is a good thing? It's time to overturn Terry.
Hey there, I'm Officer Madwin. I'm here with Chille. What are my officer's rights over you?
Well, for example, you have Terry v. Ohio.
So if I'm reasonably suspicious...
I have to get on my knees.
Perfect. And I can put you in handcuffs?
Yes.
I can throw you in the car?
Yes.
I can bring you to prison?
Yes.
I can rough you up a little bit?
All the time.
Perfect. Awesome. I want to drag you out of a car.
Oh, that's Pennsylvania versus Mims right here. Pennsylvania versus Mims says you got to get out of the car for officer safety.
Right, but for my safety, can I also drag your passenger out of the car?
Absolutely. Arizona versus Johnson, 2009, says that you got to get out of the car, again, as the passenger for officer safety.
Oh, I love it, love it. But I want to not raid you. Can I do that for officer safety?
An extension of Terry versus Ohio, Wilson versus Arkansas. They can knock raid you, but they have to knock unless they're afraid for officer safety.
Actually, what I really want to do is just shoot you in the back of the head. Can I do that?
Yes. Tennessee versus Garner right here. Police cannot shoot you in the back of the head unless they're in fear for their lives as you run away.
I'm always in fear of my life.
You hear me rallying about Terry v. Ohio, but how come? Why? Why would I care about Terry v. Ohio? Because Terry v. Ohio creates our prison industry. You see Terry v. Ohio right here in 1968? Well, look, there was even a little dip in the prison industry because of the 64 Civil Rights Act that said police could not discriminate against someone based on race. A little dip in the prison industry. Terry, what it does is it removes your probable cause standard for being arrested. The Supreme Court's formed in 1789 and it upholds the first 10 amendments. And it says that you cannot be arrested unless there's probable cause. Probable cause is where you created a victim. I have got out of my cabin, got on my horse, went down to the police bureau and filed a grievance against you. Beat my wife, smacked my child, killed my dog. You've created a victim. I'm mad at you. Sworn by oath or affirmation. You're only supposed to be arrested if you create a victim. Terry v. Ohio says you can get arrested for reasonable suspicion. If you're in high school or college, I'm talking directly to you. My generation will see Terry fall. Plessy versus Ferguson was passed in 1896, made Jim Crow laws, segregation, horrid. It was overruled in Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. That's 58 years. Terry v. Ohio was passed in 1968. It's 2021. That's 53 years. We're on the cusp of change. I'll be standing there when it's overruled. I won't be standing there when you make the Supreme Court electable. Pace versus Alabama was 1883, criminalized interracial relationships. 160 whites were lynched in 1884 because of that law. It wasn't overruled until the 1967 Loving versus Virginia. You want to hear something really sick, how bad the Supreme Court is? Reese versus United States wasn't overruled till the 1965 Civil Rights Voting Act, and then it was reinstituted. In Shelby versus Holder, your Voting Act was removed again by the Supreme Court. It's going to be you that changes it. I'm not just here to complain about police. I'm here to offer solutions. How much do you really know about police? How much do you really know about policing? These are the 3 commissions on policing. The Wickersham was done in 1929, the Knapp in 1972, and the Mullen Commission in 1994. If you haven't read them, you really don't know anything about police or policing. You only know what your friend, your neighbor, your lover, your husband, your brother, your best friend told you about policing. And what I hear all the time is that my brother's a cop and he was a good one. No, he wasn't. He was horrific. Have you read these? If you read these, then you would know that. And these commissions were not ordered by some left-leaning snowflake. These commissions were ordered by Herbert Hoover, Richard Nixon, and Bill Clinton, 3 of the most authoritarian presidents in US history. All 3 commissions say the exact same thing. Police are completely lawless, completely ineffective in stopping or preventing crime, and that they're the most corrupt, violent organization America knows. If you have a lover who's a cop, all you know is what they tell you. The founding of our country is set up on checks and balances. I'm recommending that we create 2 new agencies to oversee police that do not connect to police at all. A third-party watchdog agency that has subpoena power, that overlooks district attorneys, government officials, and makes sure that all police warrants go through them. A third-party auditing agency that gets all the body cam footage and is on scene to record police the full time that they're involved with any person. This is checks and balances. These are not my ideas. I did not come up with checks and balances. These ideas are by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Montesquieu, and John Locke. Our Constitution is based on the principles of these men's philosophies. We need checks and balances on policing. Tune in on June 19th and I'll explain to you real solutions for police brutality and how to fix the corrupt, tyrannical Supreme Court. I want you to read the 3 police commissions, the 3 commissions on policing. This one is the 1994 Mullen Commission. This one talks about the code of silence, where police won't tell anything about any other cop, and it talks about the Back the Blue slogan that was created by an advertising agency because the Mullen Commission was so atrocious and said how horrible police are, that they're completely lawless, they're violent, they're gang members, they're either the head of every organized gang or they're the muscle for the organized gang. That's in the Mullen. The Wickersham Commission came out in 1929, and this is about prohibition, how the police are either, again, the head of the alcohol gang or the gang itself. Olmsted versus United States, I believe, was 1927, and in that case, Roy Olmsted was convicted for bootlegging. He was a Seattle police lieutenant. Have you ever heard about that before? And then this is the Knapp Commission in 1974. This says police are completely lawless. I challenge you to read them. 3 police commissions. If you don't have them, I got them. You should truly overrule Hodges versus the United States. What this case does is it says that the 13th Amendment, slavery is abolished unless you're convicted of a crime. It says the 13th Amendment cannot be altered or added to. That's Hodges versus United States. I believe it's 1908. Please, again, fact check me. I don't have a photographic memory. I remember a lot of things. So Hodges versus United States, I'm recommending goes up for judicial review. And after that case is reviewed, then I recommend that we alter the 13th Amendment, slavery is abolished, and omit the second line entirely. In 1908, why do you think they passed Hodges versus United States that the 13th Amendment couldn't be altered? How come you think they did that? We weren't going back to slavery. What's the other part of that? How come that is? Why is that? My favorite 2 questions. Why? How come? I'm with a cop here and we're talking about Graham versus Connor, and I'm explaining to him that this is a dated model.
Why? Why do you think that?
Because Graham versus Connor makes it so the cops got to make split-second decisions, and that's your life in that split second.
So I'm on a job and I have to make split-second decisions. Who should be making those decisions?
You shouldn't make any split-second decisions. Film it. Let's say you go to a domestic violence and some guy's literally attacking his wife. What should you do?
Well, I need to stop him
No.
from hitting her.
No. Protect the victim and film him.
I mean, I'm happy to film him.
Right. Protect the victim. Do you see
Okay,
what I'm
yeah,
saying?
protect the victim.
Protect the victim. And then film him. Don't fight him and show it to the judge. Nobody wants barbarians on the streets.
It's true. I mean, that's not why I'm here. You know,
No.
I'm here to pick him up and stop him. So
And should you get hurt?
I don't think so.
Exactly. Film them. Don't fight them. Graham versus Connor's an outdated model of policing. Time for change. I'm with a cop. Hey, you're hurting him. Dude, listen to me. I'm undercover police, guys. Back off. Back off. You heard me? Copper, come help.
Wickersham. Now. Mullen, do those words mean anything to you? Of course they don't, because you have no clue what I do. All cops are bastards. You don't know what I do. Black the blue. You don't know what I do. There have been 3 different reports and commissions that deeply entail what actually happens on a police report. 1929 comes out in 31. We've got Wickersham Commission. And then, that's too old. So maybe 1972 comes out in 74. We've got the Knapp Report. Too old, 1992 comes out in 94. We have the Mullen Report. But I bet you haven't read any of them, and you won't. And if you haven't, suck it. You don't know what I do.
What Terry v. Ohio does is it puts officer safety over your civil liberties. That's what you need to understand. The detainment procedures that are really arrested, those were created by police after the Supreme Court said that they could detain us, which is really arrested, and call it for officer safety. Now, the police then created all of these policies of you have to get on your knees. It immediately enters a POW style of arrest. And the wording the Supreme Court uses is that when a cop is investigating the criminal, go on my YouTube page and listen to the Terry v. Ohio oral arguments, and you'll hear the racism. It's crazy. I tell people this and they don't do it. Go listen to the oral arguments. They don't talk with big words. It's not complicated. What Terry v. Ohio does is the police can do anything they want to you. Kill you, rape you, doesn't matter what it is, if it's in the name of officer safety. And I'm not kidding. I'm here with Officer Madwin, and he's going to explain the difference between Kerr versus California and Wilson versus Arkansas. Tell me about Kerr.
Kerr says that I can knock on your door, announce myself as a police officer, then walk in without a warrant.
Oh, so you mean you just go bang, 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 police, 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 and then just come running in my house?
That's right, Chille.
Why?
Well, it's based on common law from the 1600s.
Common law says that police can just knock and then come running in your home. Maybe 1600s common law is dated. Tell me about Wilson versus Arkansas.
Oh, Wilson even gets even better, because I don't have to knock or announce myself as a cop. I can no-knock raid you, walk right into your home.
That's absolutely insane. How come you can no-knock raid me and run into my house?
Let's go back to Terry v. Ohio. It says that if I fear for my life, I can put my officer safety above your civil liberties.
So I have no Fourth Amendment right to be free in my house. I have no Fourth Amendment right to be free in my person. You can just run in and no-knock raid me.
Chille, I did it to you once. I'll do it again.
So help me understand so I can learn from you. A cop demanding I get on my knees, lay on my belly, and put me in handcuffs. There's a difference between a good cop and a bad cop doing that to me. I'm ready to learn.